Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another in a series of GW Town Hall meetings, a discussion with our GW community. It is now my great pleasure to welcome to our stage Board of Trustee Chairman Nelson Carbonell and the President of the George Washington University, Dr. Thomas LeBlanc.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see all of you here today. Before I introduce President LeBlanc, I just wanted to go through a few things to recap our last year. So first of all, I think we should take great pride in our community and how we conducted the presidential search. Last summer, we began a search with a 19-person search committee. That search committee did 30 town hall meetings. I see many familiar faces from those town hall meetings. And we really worked hard to make sure that our community came together in understanding the kind of person we were looking for, the types of challenges and opportunities we were going to lay before them. We then continued to build, I think, a fantastic, broad, diverse pool of candidates. That pool really came because of the terrific opportunity to come here to be president of George Washington University and the community that we have built. And Tom will talk a little bit about his experience with that. We went through that pool and aided by the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, by the Faculty Consultative Committee, we narrowed that down, and frankly, one candidate emerged head and shoulders above everyone else, and that was Dr. Tom LeBlanc, who was then provost at the University of Miami. So I'd like us to give ourselves a round of applause for a terrific search and a terrific outcome. So once Dr. LeBlanc was named, he was elected January 6th by the Board of Trustees unanimously. We began a transition process. I asked Aristide Collins to lead a transition working group that had Dorinda Tucker, Beth Nolan, Lorraine Voles, and Terry Murphy. And they aided Dr. LeBlanc in coming to learn about the George Washington University. He met with faculty leaders, with student leaders, with staff, with vice presidents, deans, and really drank a lot of information in so that when he started as president August 1st, he could hit the ground running. So I want to thank Aristide and the transition working group for all their efforts in transitioning Tom LeBlanc. So let me introduce you to our new president. Dr. Tom LeBlanc received his BS degree in computer science from the State University of New York. He then went on to complete master's and PhD degrees in computer science at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. He has served at every level in the academy, beginning as an assistant professor at the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York, then department chair, ultimately dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and Engineering at that same institution. From there, he went on to serve as executive vice president and provost at the University of Miami for the last 12 years, where he oversaw the academic and research enterprise as the chief academic and chief budget officer. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to the GW community the 17th president of the George Washington University, Dr. Tom LeBlanc. Tom.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. And I want to thank the chair of the Board of Trustees, the search committee, and everyone I met as a part of this process for such a warm welcome and such a great process. I am now 10 months into my relationship with George Washington University. I was first entered into the search first week in November, and that started my learning process. I will say that I had a little bit of history with GW. I chaired the accreditation team for the Middle States Accreditation of the university about 10 years ago. And it gave me an opportunity to meet some of the people here, to visit 3 main campuses, learn a lot about the programs. And so that was kind of an advantage. So when they finally called me about this search, I was very interested in looking into it because I had great admiration for the institution and thought it was a great opportunity. My wife and I moved into the F Street house on July 28th, so we're now official residents of DC. I have a driver's license from the district to prove it. I have some interesting stories from DMV along the way. And we're here on campus. We welcomed back the freshman class, or not back all the students, but the freshman class we welcomed into the dormitories that are right across the street. So I have 1,000 new freshmen in Thurston as my neighbors, several hundred in Mitchell, and it's been fun watching them come to campus and learn their way around while we're learning our way around. It has been a whirlwind from January 6th till now, and I've spent a lot of time reading materials, meeting with folks, as Nelson mentioned, visiting the campus, and I'm really drinking from the fire hose, but I'm really enjoying it. And I want to make it very clear that I am really delighted to be here. And it's not just because there's a Category 5 hurricane about to hit Miami. And I do want to send my thoughts and prayers to all my friends down in Miami. But I want to make it very clear, I chose George Washington University. While the university was busy deciding to choose me, I was choosing George Washington University. I see a great opportunity, a distinguished institution on the cusp of its bicentennial, tremendous, tremendous excitement about the potential of this institution, and frankly, a lot of excitement about being in DC on the part of our students, the kind of folks we recruit, and on my part. I've never really lived in DC. I've really never lived inside the city. Everywhere I've worked, I was always in the suburbs. So all the interesting things that come with living in a city, I'm now experiencing for the first time, including being across the street from a dormitory with 1,000 freshmen in it. But my wife and I are loving it so far. I realize I'm in the honeymoon period, and if I don't like it now, I'm in real trouble. So I love it right now, and I'm hoping to keep it on this high. I do want to send a shout out. I understand we're live streaming this out there, and want to send a shout out to anyone who's watching online. Wish you could be here. It's a beautiful day, and we have an auditorium full of interested people. I want to share with you just some of my thoughts that I've developed over my transition period, because I'm starting a conversation with the community of GW about our future. Whenever I meet with a group, and it's always interesting because the people in the group have years and years of experience with GW, and as I say, I'm basically into my 10th month, they ask me, so Mr. President, what are your aspirations for GW? And I think it's really important for us to start to talk about our aspirations for GW. And as I've looked at the kinds of decisions that have been made, frankly, over the entire history of the university, and a lot of the decisions that have been made in the last decade under President Knapp and during the transition, it's become clear to me that this is an institution that is poised for the next stage of development. And what does that look like? Well, here's how I would describe our collective aspirations. We aspire to preeminence as a comprehensive global research university. Every one of those words is important. We aspire, not me, not just one of you, all of us. We aspire. Why are we aspiring? Because that's what universities do. We make dreams come true. Student dreams, faculty dreams, patients that visit doctors. We make dreams come true. We aspire to preeminence. Anyone who's interested in aspiring to mediocrity ought to be somewhere else. We aspire to preeminence as a comprehensive. Many people may not remember, I've been reading some books, we used to have a dental school. We don't have a dental school anymore. So comprehensive does not mean you have to have everything. But it does mean you have to have a broad portfolio of academic opportunities for our students. And it helps explain why we made investments in things like the Science and Engineering Hall, and why we were pleased to have the Corcoran become a part of the university. You can't have a comprehensive university without significant offerings in the arts and without excellence in science and engineering. Global. We admit students from around the world. We look for the best students everywhere in the world. We hire faculty from around the world, and frankly, we compete. We compete for reputation, we compete for publication space, we compete for grants around the world, and we ought to think of ourselves as a global university. Research. We are a research university, and that has consequences. It means that we're making significant investments in the scholarship of our faculty. And when I say research and scholarship, I mean across a broad range of academic disciplines, from the studio artist, dance, performance, to the basic sciences. In whatever field that we're here at, we have faculty doing scholarship. So we aspire to preeminence as a comprehensive global research university. In every audience in which I have made that statement, I have yet to find anyone who really disagrees with it. We may not have always said it that way, but in fact, as a university, that's how we've acted. And so now I want to make sure we're all being very conscious about our aspiration. Within that broad umbrella of our long-term aspirations, I've been focusing on 5 particular areas during the near term, and these were areas that were pointed out during the search process as requiring near-term attention. And I want to share them with you because they kind of set the agenda for the next few years, at least from my point of view. The first one is the undergraduate student experience. Every university pretty much has undergraduates, and it's a critical part of our mission. And we need to think very carefully about the experience that these students are having. And I can tell you the experience is across a range of activities. What do they experience when they go to bed at night in the dormitory? What do they experience when they try to eat? What is their experience in the classroom? What happens when they try to move between schools here at the university? What is the experience at the financial aid office? We need to look at that across the board because universities are often structured in different offices and silos so that no one actually can see a picture of the undergraduate experience. One of the first things I did when I got here on campus was I took a tour of all the dormitories. If you haven't been in the dormitories, you're missing an important part of the undergraduate student experience because most of them do sleep there. You have to go and you have to eat in the places where the students eat. I think I've had a chance to eat in most of them by now, so you get a feel for how much do things cost? When are these places open? What's the food like? Would you eat there 3 times a day? These are the kinds of questions that we want to make sure we understand, but it gets, again, down to every single office at the university. We owe our students a first-rate undergraduate experience, and we want to look collectively at how well we're doing in that regard. So that's one area of emphasis. The second one is we've just completed a $1 billion campaign. We should take great pride in that, and I thank President Knapp for his leadership for the completion of that campaign because it puts George Washington University among a select set of private institutions in this country, there's about 35 of them, that have raised $1 billion. It's an important mark of distinction. We've achieved that mark of distinction, and I'm delighted. When you complete a campaign, you typically step back and ask the question, now how are we structured for fundraising for the future? Philanthropy is a critical part of any university's future plans because nowadays that's an incredibly important source of money for our aspirations. We need to make sure that we're structured appropriately internally. We also need to make sure that we treat our alumni right. If you have a good relationship with your alumni, they will support you in the long run in the institution. Right now, we have a 9% alumni giving rate. That is among the lowest of the private research universities. We need to make sure they have a positive undergraduate student experience, C.1, and then that we structure our development function appropriately, and I want to look very carefully at that. Number 3, I want to look at how we support research. Remember, in our aspirational statement, we're a research university. I want to look carefully at the structures that we've built over the last decade to support research and how well they're working for the faculty and supporting the scholarship. We've made some investments. How well have those investments paid off? What sorts of investments do we need to make going forward? How do we measure our progress on our aspiration towards preeminence as a research university? So that's another area of focus. The fourth one is to look very closely at the partnership between the hospital, the faculty practice plan, the MFA, and our medical school, because that partnership, which was founded 20 years ago and has served us reasonably well for that period, will not allow us to achieve preeminence in medicine in the way that we hope. The revenue flows are such that it simply isn't going to work for us in the long term. We've got to look very closely at that. It turns out those are 3 different corporate entities. The hospital is not George Washington's. It's a partnership between George Washington University and UHS. The practice plan is actually a separate corporate entity, even though all of the faculty in the practice plan are also our faculty. And then, of course, the university and the medical school are their own separate corporate entity. So we have a three-way partnership, and we need to strengthen that partnership and make sure the partnership helps us achieve our aspirations. And then the fifth thing is I want to look very closely at the institutional culture here at George Washington University. Universities don't often talk about culture, and we kind of get the culture randomly. It's an accumulation of personalities over years and years and years. And then one day you wake up and you look at it and you ask yourself, is this the culture of a preeminent global research university? And I've heard from a lot of people that I interact with that we can do a lot better. But we have to consciously start to talk about our culture. Some of the attributes that I've heard from you about our culture is, first of all, we're very risk averse. And that can mean we're risk averse at the highest levels on strategic decisions, but it usually means we're risk averse at every level in the organization. No one appears to have ever read the book Getting to Yes, because all we know how to do is quickly get to know. And it is amazing how many no's you have to accept until you can get to maybe. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of our people, and I think it impacts the student experience because I think they're seeing the same culture. We also have a culture, and again, I've heard this during the transition from you, we have a culture where every single decision is dominated by the financial impact. Now, what's the consequence of one clapper and a bunch of laughers? I need to know what this means. But again, I've heard that and I've seen it myself. I want to be very clear. I am a prudent fiscal manager. But it's hard to be aspirational if every single conversation starts with, if it costs one incremental dollar, we're not doing it. And that's been a defining attribute, I think, in too many people's experience, and we want to make sure that we look at that. In the end, I think we need to have a culture of service. We need to think about how we're serving in our roles the population that we deal with. The financial aid office needs to be service-oriented towards students. The faculty who make up the curriculum need to think about the implications for students of the decisions they're making, whether it's making it easier for students to achieve their educational objectives or harder. We don't always think about who are we trying to serve. The research office needs to think about how am I serving the faculty? And in every single case, if we ask the question, can we do a better job of service? I think the answer is we'll see some improvements. Now, I have to tell you, as a new member of this community, I'm already experiencing our culture. Turns out I'm a new employee in addition to being a new president. You're laughing because some of you were new employees once. Now, it turns out that my name is spread across the media, so most people know I'm the president. But there are a few that don't. And so it creates a very interesting experience. What's your name, sir? Tom. What's your last name? LeBlanc. How do you spell that, sir? Oh, you capitalized the B. I said, where do you live, sir? 1925 F Street. Oh, that's right nearby, sir. Yes, actually, it's on campus. So I've had a chance to experience that as a new employee. So in 1 week, I was a new employee and I was a DMV customer. And so I learned a lot in my first week. We need to talk collectively about how we can create a culture that we're all proud of and that serves us as employees, as faculty, as students, as staff. And that is not a simple task. It's not going to come from the president making speeches. That's a holistic effort that can take years, but I'd like to think that our work starts today. And we start to think very consciously about building a culture that we want to have as a university. So that's the 5 areas that I want to focus on in the near term. I should be very clear that there's a lot of other things in running a complicated billion-dollar research university enterprise that I'll also be involved in. But these are 5 areas of particular importance that have been pointed out to me during the search process and the transition process that I want to focus on. So with that by way of introduction, I'd like to throw it open to your questions.
Great. So if you could just line up at the mic here in the middle, and we'll take your questions. And I do have some questions that were submitted as part of the registration. So if you could line up, I'll start with some of these, and then we can move on to the questions from the audience. So President LeBlanc, this question comes from Murphy Miller. And the question is, what are some of your ideas to better support students and create a strong sense of community on campus?
I think the sense of community on campus is a real important issue, and I've been already giving it some thought and attention. We have a particular challenge as an urban university. So challenge number one is, and this is true of many urban universities, the first challenge is, where's the campus? And so when you walk around, the question is, are we creating an identifiable campus and a campus community or not? So that's one of our challenges. A second challenge is that we have a lot of distractions from the GW community. They're called the federal government, they're called internships, they're called these wonderful museums you can go visit. There's a lot of things that are pulling students away from the GW community that other universities might not have to deal with. So if we want to have a GW community, we need a sense of place, we need a sense of program, and we need a sense of community. One of the things I've been looking at is, first of all, our sense of place. When I first met with the students, one of the issues that came up was, how do we create a sense of place? And we talked a little bit about how NYU has used these very prominent banners in Greenwich Village to create a clear sense of the NYU campus. And they have a similar challenge to us. And some of the students said, well, we used to have banners, but they took away the banners. And I'll never forget, one young man said, I like the banners. They made me feel like I was on my campus. And so, of course, I left that meeting, immediately went back to Rice Hall and said, what's the story on the banners? Now, the interesting thing was that the students all had a hypothesis as to why the banners had disappeared. So one student said, I heard that the flags in the wind would wrap around the poles, and they had to hire someone to unwrap the poles. And in a cost-cutting move, they fired him. Now, I'm sitting there thinking, at what university are students trying to figure out something like this? And it turns out that that wasn't the reason. The reason was we bought relatively inexpensive banners, or the lamppost flags, and the colors ran. And so we were no longer buff and blue. I think we were pink and muddy, something like that. So now they took down the banners because they didn't look good anymore. And the only thing worse than no banners is bad banners. And so I said, okay, are we getting new banners, right? Well, we already spent the money on those banners, and so now we'd have to allocate new money for new banners, and I said, stop, get new banners. We're bringing back the banners. So some of you may have noticed the lamppost banners, a bunch of them are already coming back. The flags on the library and the other main buildings and so on, we'll bring those back as well, because it's important to have a sense of place if you want to create community. But then you have to actually have a place. So when I toured the dormitories, the question I asked in every building was, where's the community space? And again, we're an urban campus, so a lot of students are going to spend their time in the dormitories. There are not sufficient community spaces in the dormitories either. So we're looking carefully at what we might do in that regard. Now, in all of these areas, I want to be very clear, there are some constraints. We're in a campus, we're in an urban environment, and so on. But if all of us collectively ask the question, how do we create community? How do we create community spaces? How do we create programming within those spaces? By the way, the veranda in the business school, it's got this beautiful sculpture and no outdoor furniture. I haven't figured out why yet, but let's put some outdoor furniture out there. Top of the Marvin Center, we have a wonderful plaza. All summer, I would look down on that plaza from Rice Hall, and nobody would sit out there because the sun was out and there were no umbrellas. So let's put some umbrellas out on the Marvin Center. If you focus on community spaces, defining community, and then putting the appropriate programming in there, I think that's how we start to address the question.
Great. So we'll start with you. Please just identify yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Trustee Carbonell and President LeBlanc, thank you for taking my question. I am Johnny Chow. I am the Program Associate for the GW Program on Applied Research and Investing, known as GW Perry. GW Perry partners with the Innovation Center under the leadership of Anna Maria Konya-Tannen within SEEDS. Together, we have been thinking about the idea of GW hosting Amazon's second headquarters. As you know, Amazon announced a plan for a second headquarters outside of Seattle. I would like to ask, has anyone at GW discussed the idea for our university to host Amazon's second headquarters?
So I'm aware that Amazon has announced they're looking for the second headquarters. I've heard the job count number. I haven't actually heard any discussion of that yet at GW. So I frankly don't have anything interesting to say about that yet.
Hi, I'm a sophomore. My name is Julia. My question is GW's $1.57 billion endowment in alignment with the university's values? In a sense, is it invested in projects that support my generation's ability to live in a just and sustainable world?
Well, I've got some good news, and that is that our endowment is more than $1.57 billion.
Okay, cool.
I mean, the last I looked, it was somewhere between 1.8 and 1.9. I've got some other good news, which is that about at least half of our endowment is invested in DC real estate, which is very compatible with our values. My previous point about community, and in fact, that we have so much of that real estate is what really is defining not only our campus today, but I think also a lot of our future potential. So in many ways, the answer is yes. I think the more specific question is there anything in the endowment portfolio that may not completely align with those values? To which the answer is probably yes. With your values on one particular dimension, I'm sure that's the case. With respect to other areas of divestment, I suspect there may also be the case. So is it in full alignment? No. Is it better than many institutions? I think the answer is probably yes. And I'm aware of the issue and the resolution, specifically with respect to fossil fuels. And that's been a subject of conversation that I've had both in these town hall meetings and I'm starting to have with the board to at least understand where we are today so I can more knowledgeably answer that question going forward.
Thank you.
Hello. First, I'd just like to thank you for having these town halls. It's a great thing to be doing. I'm Matthew Zimmer. I'm a sophomore here studying political science. And my question is about sustainability. The previous president did a lot of work in terms of sustainability. He brought us from bottom of the rankings to 18th in the country, which I think is an amazing thing to do. And I just wonder if you would like to continue those policies and maybe further them.
So I'm glad you pointed out the tremendous progress that's been made because it is actually a pretty remarkable story. I just saw those rankings where GW is ranked 18th, and that's pretty impressive. And the answer is yes, I'd love to continue them. I haven't had a real detailed briefing on what all that means yet. I'm generally aware of sustainability efforts at universities and my prior university and so on. So I don't have a full gamut yet of what we're doing here. I've heard about some of the things, like cogeneration in terms of the energy plant. That's a really important thing. The way we're now getting, through our energy contracts, more sustainable sources. So I'm aware of a number of the things, but I'm not aware of all of the initiatives yet, and I still got a lot to learn about future projects and how we can do that. But I do think sustainability ought to be one of our driving goals in those projects, and I'm happy to continue the progress.
One follow-up. Are you aware that if we divested from fossil fuels, we would be ranked number 2 in the country?
I have heard that our ranking would improve.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks for taking our questions. My question, I'm Robert Donaldson, Chair of Biology, and I've been a faculty person here since 1977, so I've seen the university change. And my basic question addresses both the student experience and the research experience, and that is, what can a university do, not just us, but any university to do, to facilitate the teaching activities of new faculty such that it has a beneficial impact on the students and at the same time allow that new faculty person to develop his scholarship?
So that's a great question. It's often formulated in the minds of parents, why should I send my child to a research university to go to college? And I keep hearing that there's tension between research and teaching, and if they go to a university with a research mission, they won't get any faculty attention. And that's a concern on the part of a lot of parents. I actually think the research university is a great place to go to college for a lot of reasons, but you do have to make sure that you have a strong focus on the teaching mission. I was pleased to see that we have a new program for new faculty. Many of our faculty are trained in their scholarship of their discipline, not in how to teach. And so when they go to the university for a job, sometimes it's the first time they've actually had to teach a whole class by themselves. And so we have a program. It's run out of the library, is my understanding, and it's a program for new faculty to help them learn how to teach. Now, the integration of their teaching and scholarship will be something that'll be a combination of new faculty training and also disciplinary training. But we do have that program. I think it replaces another program we've had, so it's not like we've never done anything. This is a new program designed specifically for new faculty to learn how to teach with the latest technology.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chris Dietrich, and I work at GSHED, and I'm a member of the GW Staff Association. And I want to add my thanks to you for coming and talking to and listening to all of us. And my question is also a very broad one. The Staff Association is also working very hard to get to yes. We are one of the only schools in our market basket without staff representation in the decision-making elements of the university. And so when we think about numbers, there are about 4,000 staff members across all the campus. Yet when you change the word to employee, that number almost doubles and includes you. It includes faculty and staff. And so we just want to basically tender an open invitation to you to come to, or you or one of your representatives, to come to one of our GWU Staff Association meetings so we can all get to know each other and talk about all of our mutual issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kayleen Price. I'm on the women's rowing team. And to talk more about culture, where do you see, as student athletes and even just undergraduate students in general, how can we attribute to this culture you envision?
Well, first of all, I know how much work goes into being a student athlete, so thank you for your dedication.
Thank you.
And I've seen our crew teams out on the river, and it gives me great pride whenever I see them out rowing, because I know that we're going to beat a lot of our competitors in these upcoming sports. Students can contribute to the culture in one very important way, and that is by helping us understand the institution that you're experiencing. That's why I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit easier for me because I'm actually living on campus. So I actually know what Thurston sounds like at midnight on Saturday. Trust me, I know. And it's very hard for the people in leadership positions and even the people on the front lines to understand the experiences the student is having it. Because the student isn't touching individual offices. They're touching the university. And one of the things I've heard back from the students is they believe their relationship with the university is way too transactional. So they're not seeing an overall global university that's solving their problems. They're seeing individual offices that want to see their G-World card and they want to scan it and take money off it and that sort of thing. And so it's very helpful if through the appropriate student groups, and the athletes are a great example. You're experiencing a part of GW that most other people aren't. By the way, I hope you know, we have 500 student athletes in our athletics program. We have 50 student athletes in sailing. I didn't know we had a sailing team until I met with the athletic department. And they're experiencing the university in a different way because, first of all, the gymnastics team is practicing out by Dulles. We have 5 sports teams that play on the Mount Vernon campus, but the students have most of their experience here. They know the shuttle system much better than most of us do because they're on it almost every day. They have training table for the athletes for breakfast, but then they're out with all the other students for the other 2 meals of the day. They're having a slightly different experience, which I will never understand unless I sit down with the student athletes, which is why I was happy to be at the opening dinner where Bonnie St. John gave a great speech and sat with 500 student athletes to hear about their experience. So we need to collectively, and again, this is not just me, we need to collectively start to think about the holistic student experience and hear from the students. The Board of Trustees has created a task force on the undergraduate student experience to help support this effort to look very closely at the experience. So giving us feedback, regular feedback. I have a presidential fellow, Grace. Grace is right down here. She's my wonderful connection to the student body. Grace, as a presidential fellow, is someone who graduated from GW and is now doing her master's degree, and in return for a tuition waiver, she serves in my office. There are 15 such fellows. They're spread all over the university, but they help us create a nice connection to the student body. And if you can feed information to Grace that can help inform our thinking about this, and also make sure that you talk to the representatives on the student task force, that would be a huge help.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Medley, and I'm a student both in the School of Engineering and Applied Science and in the Corcoran School of the Arts and Design program for theater and dance. And if it's all right, I'd like to ask a question about each of those.
Oh, I would just like to say you won really big on those two acquisitions. You're the first student I've met who is saying, wow.
Thank you. So you mentioned the Science and Engineering Hall, and I'd like to add to that there's the C's Student Peer Advisory Network that we have. Several mentors, including myself, are here this afternoon. And what I'd like to ask is, how do you plan to continue the development and the success of STEM at GW and in the School of Engineering and Applied Science?
So that's a great question. I think it's the first time I've received that question. I've often heard the other question. As the first STEM president at GW, are you going to break everything? There's a misconception that, particularly at universities, academic leadership are completely defined by their discipline. And so when I first became a dean, everyone on the humanities side of the house was asking, oh no, we have a computer scientist as a dean. Will he get us? And then when I became provost, it was, oh no, will he get law? Will he get medicine? And then looking at the history of GW, I guess I'm the first STEM discipline individual to be the president of GW. And so there were a lot of early questions along the lines of, does this mean somehow we'll stop emphasizing our expertise in politics and policy and law and so on? And I want to be very clear, I don't think the discipline of the president should dictate the future of the university. And I don't plan to make radical changes. I do think science and engineering are really important. So important, I devoted my life as an academic to science and engineering. So yes, they are very important. And I want to see us be preeminent as a comprehensive research university. And you can't do that without preeminence in medicine, preeminence in science, and preeminence in engineering. So do I plan to focus on preeminence in those disciplines? Absolutely. Will that be at the expense of things that we've historically done really well? Absolutely not.
Thank you. And for my second question, so the Corcoran School is currently in a process of merging with the Department of Theater and Dance, and so now we're the program of theater and dance within that school. So how do you plan on expressing and contributing to, as you said, the preeminence, the importance of the arts and theater at GW?
Well, first of all, we did, in fact, bring the Corcoran into the university, and that work is not yet complete. You've just talked about the reorganization of the academic programs into the School of the Arts. There will be ongoing work in the physical infrastructure. I love the fact that you're studying two subjects that are often viewed as opposite ends of the spectrum. So supporting academic programs that try to make that crossover. Design is really a field of the future, and if you can bring that in, particularly on the engineering side, I think that can be important. So I'm generally a big supporter of the arts. I happen to love music. I've got one son whose profession is music and the other one whose passion is music. I think music is an important part of the campus experience. And I think the arts are an important part of any comprehensive university. I don't have a lot of specific things that I can say right now. We have whole organizations and deans and a provost who will deal with the academic side of that. But generally, I would be very supportive that we fully and appropriately integrate the Corcoran and the School of the Arts into our vision for preeminence as a comprehensive university.
Thank you.
Hi, Sumit Joshi, Economics. So it was very nice to see that we are going to be pushing for preeminence, and research is a major component that you've highlighted. But in that regard, we seem to be operating under some sort of an overall cap on tenured lines at the university, and I was sort of wondering if that is going to be relaxed, if you really need to push research and really be preeminent in that regard. Thank you.
So I want to make sure I understand the question. We're operating a gap in tenure lines that's relative to some set somewhere. Obviously, when you make an investment in research, the biggest investment that universities make are in the tenured faculty who are doing the research. So that's something we're going to have to look very carefully at. There is not a magic wand that I plan to wave that suddenly says we have a $10 billion endowment, not a $1.8 billion endowment, or that says that somehow we're going to grow the faculty without figuring out how to pay for it. So we have to think these things through very carefully, but it helps if you start with a vision of where you're trying to go. And if the vision is, and I believe it should be, we aspire to preeminence as a comprehensive global research university. If that's the vision, then the good news is we know exactly what that looks like, because there are a number of such institutions that I think we could all collectively agree fit that statement. And the wonderful thing about universities is they all publish their data. So we know exactly what it means to be a preeminent comprehensive global research university. For example, you could look at the qualification criteria under the AAU. The American Association of Universities published their membership criteria. One such criterion is, how many members do you have in the National Academy of Science and Engineering? If the answer is X, and that's the average of the AAU, then you look like you belong in the AAU on that measure. If the average is X and you have X over 2 or X over 10 or whatever the number might be, then you don't look like you belong there. So it turns out the AAU doesn't have a criterion on how many tenured faculty you have. They want to know what kind of impact you're having, not how many you have. So we have to look very carefully at where we're going to make the investments. I also want to be clear that this is an aspiration, which means A, we're not there yet, and B, it probably means we'll never get there, because the minute you stop aspiring to something, you might as well close up shop. But I hope to make significant progress and measurable progress along the way. Now, how that will relate to the size of the tenure track lines, I haven't dug into the details enough to be able to make a statement about that yet. I will say that based on a meeting that I happened to have this morning, it's my understanding that quietly, with our culture, with our cuts, we added 100 tenure track faculty over the last 5 years. I don't know how many people know that. If it turns out that that's true, then clearly we have already been on a path seeking preeminence as a global research university. So there's obviously a lot of nuance in here. We have a lot of different schools and colleges. Everybody would like to grow. Everybody would like to grow their tenure track faculty. We're going to have to look very carefully at how we do that, because those are the kinds of commitments that will be solidified, but they'll also have to be paid for.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is James. I'm a sophomore studying computer science and political science. Something I know that you've spoken before about is interest in getting more students to double major in fields that aren't quite aligned with one another. So I was wondering, kind of, was this something that you worked on at the University of Miami, and what are your plans to get more students interested and aware of doing double major programs in fields that don't necessarily overlap?
So let me start by saying I believe that a lot of students come to college today with very broad intellectual interests. And we're seeing that more and more students are not pigeonholed in a traditional discipline. Whether it means they want to double and triple major, or whether they want to do an interdisciplinary program, whatever it is, they're pushing the boundaries of the traditional departmental structures. So that's kind of point one. Point two is students don't come in the traditional narrow perspective of the academic disciplines that we're used to. So for example, if I double major in math and computer science, everybody thinks, well, they're kind of the same. And in some aspects, that's probably true. If I double major in biology and biochemistry, well, those are kind of the same. But there are some really interesting career opportunities and really interesting intellectual opportunities in bringing together things that are not just interdisciplinary, but are at far ends of the spectrum. And I think I mentioned one earlier, design and engineering. That's basically what's made Apple billions and billions of dollars, is that kind of that marriage. So what we need to do as a university is make sure that those opportunities are available to our students. Wouldn't it be a shame if we spent a lot of money building a great computer science department and a lot of money building a great design program, and we didn't let students do the two things together? Now you might say, well, what's stopping them? Well, I've been in the academy my entire life. There are a million things stopping them. Faculty rules, credit hours, timing of classes, how you schedule study abroad. There are so many barriers that are not put there to block students. They were put there for some other reason. Let me give you just one interesting example that was pointed out when I met with the Presidential Fellows. We are known for international affairs. We're in DC. We have a whole school of international affairs. So students come here and say, I want to major in that. And I say, great. While I'm doing that, I would like to major in something else. And so the question was, can I major in international affairs and get a BS in economics? Now, if you had asked me that question with no other knowledge of GW, I would have said, that's a no-brainer. I bet you there are dozens of students who want to do that. We probably have an office called, for those of you in international affairs who want to study the BS in economics, come here. It turns out it's practically impossible. Now, nobody sat in a room and said, I'll bet 2 students are going to try and do this. Let's make a rule to prevent them. But some people sat in a room and said, if you want to major in 2 things, we don't want to make it easy for you. Otherwise, it looks like we're just credentialing. So we're going to set a pretty high bar. And it turns out that, first of all, most advisors don't understand the high bar, so it's very hard to get good advice on these things, because one advisor is sitting in one building and one advisor is sitting in the other building, and they're looking at 2 different rule books. But it's also the case that you could set a curricular bar that says, if you want to do this, and in fact it turns out to be true, in our bulletin it says, you can do this, but you have to take 150 credit hours. Well, your parents might say, wait a minute. That sounds like it costs more money. And you might say, wait a minute, that sounds like I have to stay an extra semester or 2. And then the question is, why should it take 150 credit hours to do something that GW ought to be really good at? And so when we talk about the student experience, this is another example. Until a student poses that question, there's no office in the university that says, what happens if somebody wants to do these 2 things? And in the absence of that, the student just encounters the rules as they exist. So, for example, double majors within arts and sciences at most universities are fairly straightforward. But double majors across 2 schools at a university are often very hard. And sometimes they're impossible. We've made the investment in the faculty. We've made the investment in the program. All we have to do is get the artificial barriers out of the way. The students will have a better experience. They'll create their own intellectual background that'll serve them better in their career and their life going forward. Everybody wins. All we have to do is get the artificial barriers out of the way. Another artificial barrier that breaks my heart, I believe very strongly in study abroad. I did study abroad as a 16-year-old on the American Field Service, lived for a year in Brazil, and it changed my life. My wife says, I can't believe how much you're milking that experience.
She just walked in, by the way.
Because every week something happens, and I have to tell you, that was a long time ago. Every week something happens where I have an opportunity to speak Portuguese, comment on Brazilian music, eat Brazilian food, meet someone from Brazil who lives in a city that I was at when I was in Brazil. It changed my life. Most high school students don't do study abroad anymore. The reason is getting into college has become so competitive, they fear that it'll hurt them in finishing up their high school programs. So they go study abroad in college. We create far too many artificial barriers to study abroad. We have very strong curricular straitjackets in some programs, and the faculty that are doing that are not trying to hurt the students. But they're also not thinking, how do we make sure every student can also do study abroad? You have to have good advising structures. You have to have appropriate financial aid. So these things, when they become barriers, there was no active process to make those barriers. The trickiest one in most of the academy is double majors with different degrees. I want to get a BA in this and a BS in that. Or I want to get a specialized engineering degree in this and this BA over here. Now you're getting not double majors, but double degrees. And now you're dealing with two entirely different faculties, with two entirely different standards, that probably decided on those rules without thinking about the other possibilities in the other degrees. So we're going to have to look very carefully at those. The beauty of it is most of the work of hiring the faculty, having the facilities, creating the programs, we've already done. Now we just have to do kind of the final 2% that creates these barriers that prevent students from exploiting them. And it's another area, I say, where we really need the help from the students. Because invariably, you're going to think of a combination that we wouldn't think of. And we just have to have rules that are so flexible that generally the default answer needs to be yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we're going to take a couple of Facebook questions, if we don't mind. Do we have those? Yes? Okay. All right. So the first question comes from Katie Hill, who is a GSHED distance student. What are GW's plans for supporting and enhancing graduate education as the route to produce future researchers?
Great question, and it flows from our commitment in our aspiration. We aspire to preeminence as a comprehensive global research university. What distinguishes research universities is not simply the scholarship of the faculty, although that's critical, but also their ability to train the scholars of the future, namely the graduate programs. And in that case, it's typically the terminal degree programs, the PhD programs, the JDs, MFAs in some cases, other specialized terminal degree programs. So we have to look very carefully at how well are we training the next generation of scholars. And that's something that's a part and parcel of any measurement of a research university. We need to look at what happens to the people who complete their terminal degrees here at GW, what kinds of careers do they go on to? Are they in fact enhancing the reputation of the university? At most research universities, students who take a master's degree pay tuition. Students who are doing a doctoral degree often get tuition waived and they get a stipend. Those are two hugely different economic models for a reason. The people in the doctoral programs are on a path to enhance the reputation of the university as a research university. Now the question is, are programs actually successful at doing that? And there are a lot of ways of measuring that, and when we do graduate program reviews, we ought to be looking very closely at those measurements. So I appreciate the question because this is a topic that often gets lost kind of in the rhetoric about undergraduate education and faculty. There is this critical component at every research university that is the graduate students.
Okay, we'll take your question and then we'll come back and do another Facebook question.
Thank you. I have, my name's Karen Alquist, and I have more of a suggestion than a question, something you have probably not really zeroed in on yet. You talk about community, you talk about the student experience. I appreciate your interest in the arts. My field is music. As a community, we offer many things that students can and faculty can and the neighbors in Foggy Bottom can experience. I will tell you, the publicity that goes out, whether it's online or whether it's in hard copy or whether it's on social media, doesn't really allow people to find the things that might interest them. I think if we could communicate better across the fields, we would be able to raise the respect for our institution as a comprehensive institution, just in terms of what we do, not necessarily how many different units we have. So maybe hire a few more publicity people, not just in the Corcoran, Columbian College and the university as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, I'm going to take another Facebook question now. This is from Michael Collins. What do you plan to do to strengthen the academic and reputational rankings of the university and the quality of its individual schools?
So, great question. I've been a student of rankings as long as I've been an academic administrator because as a computer scientist, I'm big on data. The problem is there are a lot of different rankings, and so you have to figure out which ones do you think are important for this institution. One ranking that everybody knows about and everybody reads and talks about is the U.S. News ranking, and they rank in a particular category called National Research Universities, and it is that category that GW is ranked 56. Usually they give a lot of data on the top 50 and a little less data on those that aren't in the top 50. So 56 out of 4,500 institutions of higher education in the United States is pretty darn good. But the question is, what are you going to do to get better? Well, the U.S. News ranking, because it's so visible, is one that most academic administrators study pretty carefully, and I've studied it really carefully. So I know exactly what causes a university to go up in the ranking and exactly what causes it to go down in the ranking. And one of the questions that I've been talking to the provost about is, what is it about the U.S. News ranking that we think is important to us? Because frankly, we all need to understand this is a vehicle for a company to make money. That's it. There is no U.S. News and World Report anymore. There's only a college rankings, and they make a fortune. So let me give you one way in which I think they're terrible. They have no variable for diversity. Nothing independent, nothing secondary, no variable that measures diversity. And yet at many colleges, what the student applications are saying is, I want to go to a more diverse community than I had in high school. I want to experience the globe at college. And U.S. News has no variable for that. On the other hand, here's where U.S. News is good. They have a variable, and they've gradually increased the weight of that variable that I think is important, and that is the graduation rate. Because students who go to college, incur debt, spend a lot of time, and don't get a degree are a national tragedy. And one of the things U.S. News did was it made everybody start to think about graduation rates. And so I think that's a good thing. Now, if I were to list the goods and the bads up here, I'd have a lot more bads than goods. But let's just focus on the good for the moment. If we improve our freshman retention rate, the fraction of freshmen who start and come back as sophomores, and we improve our 6-year graduation rate, the fraction of students who start at GW and complete a degree within 6 years, those two things are a significant part of the formula in U.S. News. And those two things should be a core part of our mission anyway, even if there wasn't a U.S. News. So most universities who've actually tried to move their rankings in the U.S. News rankings, all the press has focused on their effort to increase the SATs, which is another bad thing about U.S. News. It's overemphasized standardized test scores way beyond their actual importance. In fact, the formula is so ridiculous that they continue to have a variable for class rank, even though the vast majority of high schools will no longer do a class rank. So the fraction of your freshman class that has a class rank is dropping, and it's still sitting there in the formula. But let's go back to the good, graduation rates. If we can improve freshman retention and 6-year graduation rate, it is such a heavy weight on the formula, I believe we would easily be in the top 50. And one of the things we are focused on, and I've been talking to the provost about this, and he's been on this for a while now, is to improve those rates. Let me tell you the good news. There's a factor in U.S. News that is very hard to influence. It's called the peer assessment. They write to presidents, provosts, and deans of admissions at universities all around the country and ask them to rate us on a 1 to 5 scale. The peer assessment score is so hard to move. Universities have spent millions of dollars creating glossy brochures that they mail to presidents, provosts, and deans of admissions, talking about how great they are to buff up their peer assessment score. It never works. But the peer assessment score is 20% of the formula. It's pure reputation. The good news is we have a pretty darn good peer assessment score. We're at 3.6. We're at 56 in the overall ranking with a 3.6 peer assessment. There's not another 3.6 peer assessment until you get into the top 30, except for one, Georgia Tech, very, very good place. So we've got the hard number already in the bag, a 3.6 peer assessment. The number we can manage getting our students degrees is in our control. So I think we can actually improve on the US News ranking, and I think there's some benefit to that because students and parents look at that. But that's not the only ranking. We talked about the American Association of Universities. Well, they rank universities on a number of measures. For example, how competitive are we for federal grants? Well, it turns out with our emphasis over the last 10 years, we've moved our national ranking from about 114 to about 83. And there's a good chance with the new ranking coming out, we'll be below 80. We might be 79, 78. That's tremendous progress. But we still have a ways to go. But that's an important ranking. If you want to be a serious research university, you have to be prominent on that ranking. There are a number of other ranking systems that are out there. We need to think very carefully about which ones measure things we most care about. There are new rankings that just came out this year where primary focus was on the diversity. They're overcompensating in some way for US News because now that ranking, I think a third or a half of the ranking is diversity. There are rankings on community service where I think GW would rank very highly. So we have to figure out not how we're playing kind of a PR game. We have to think about how we want to measure ourselves, how we want to be seen out there in the world, and which rankings are most accurately doing that, and then have a focused discipline to improve our institution in those dimensions.
So unfortunately, that is the end of our time. I do have one more item, and I apologize to those of you who waited in line. I'd be happy to talk to you afterward and take your question. So, and so would the president. We have just a quick surprise. If we could have, I think we had a couple people that were going to come up to the stage. Is that correct? Okay. They're coming. Here we go. So it is President LeBlanc's birthday today. All right. So we're going to sing happy birthday? Yeah, okay, ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, President LeBlanc. Happy birthday to you. Yay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. I'm sure we'll have more opportunities in the future. And, again, thanks for all of you being here. Thanks for all your questions. And raise high GW.